Hello, how are you guys doing? Today we are going to do another episode to Architect 101. I'm trying to post at least one video per week to this playlist. I'm going to publish another video during the week, but at least one video for this playlist per week. When you're moving from software engineer paradigm to architect world, it's really hard to you to give up knowing in deep. Because as a software engineer, for years and years, you practice to learn something in deep, right? But that's a good thing as a software engineer. So now what you do is you are trying to practice that same thing as an architect. That is almost not possible because if you try to do so, you will be a better software engineer more than an architect. Why? Because then you don't have a time to expand your breadth. So now when you're thinking about the breadth, so now you think, okay, everything I should learn deep. So now you go and stuck in a loop where the paradox. So because you have so many things to learn, when you learn in that in deep, you discover something and you go in that path and you try to learn that deep and you discover something. So you struggle in the same loop and you give up. So that's a really bad. When you're struggling in the same loop, you start to believe, you start to think that what was you originally know is the best thing than the new one, because new one you don't understand. So since you don't understand, you automatically go back and thinking, no, that was the best thing. So as a side effect of this, we see a phenomena called frozen caveman anti-pattern. The idea of this, just imagine there was a caveman, he was stuck in a cave and frozen for years, right? After decades later, when he comes up and then when he see the world, he don't understand the world. It has gone, right? So that is the whole idea of this. So this is a very, very dangerous thing for an architect, as well as this is a very dangerous for the project. So because I see certain architects, so they are trying to learn everything in depth. So when they fail and they go back and stuck on the previous thing they know in deep, because they're very confident about it. Right? So since they are confident, they always trying to use the same thing on every single project. For example, if you are a really good Java engineer, if you were a really good Java engineer, when you become an architect, you think Java is the best thing in the world. There is no other language to beat Java, right? Because you try to learn Python in deep, you try to learn Node in depth, and so then you fail to do it. So you go back and stuck on your original thing. Right? If you're coming from the C background, you think like that. If you're coming from the .NET background, you think like that. So now what happens is, world is evolving, the industry is growing fast, but since you are stay in the same place, you are stuck in the same set of technologies, you are not evolving, you are not moving. So as a result, your projects are stay in the same place, right? So this same thing can happen on the code basis as well. Because I have seen teams, they believe this is our stack, we shouldn't do this, do something else. For example, if a project going with REST, right, if we see really good candidate for GraphQL, teams are hesitating to go there. Why? Because our project is a REST, this is our architecture. So but what you should do is, if you are an architect, as an architect you should think, is the GraphQL is a real fit for that, and vice versa. If your project is a GraphQL, if you see really good candidate for a REST API, you shouldn't stuck in saying, just because of my architecture is a GraphQL, I should stay only on the GraphQL. What you should do is, you should see new way how we can have integrate the mixed mode of a GraphQL and a REST. Use the REST, what's the best candidate for the REST API, use a REST gateway and use a REST API. And the best candidate for the GraphQL API, use a GraphQL gateway and use a GraphQL. Right? So now we are evolving. Okay. So now sometime you will see WebSocket. Right? You will see sometime there are a really good candidate for HTTP 2.0 API or HTTP 3.0 API. But just because of you best know it's HTTP 1.1, and then if you like your tools and your language and you're really familiar with that, you are hesitant to go to HTTP 2.0 or 3.0. Why? Because you're coming back and stuck in the original thing. Okay, this is what I'm comfortable of. So don't go into the comfortable zone, because that is creating a dangerous of caveman anti-pattern. So this caveman anti-pattern come in other way as well. Let's say there was a database crash happen, right, in one of your project, the MySQL database that crashed, you couldn't recover it, right? Then every time, every single project, when you try to use the MySQL database, you always come back to that point saying, what if this database is crashed, right? It's okay to think about it, but you need to do a RCA and see why it is crashed, and in the next project you have to fix it. That doesn't mean you shouldn't come to the MySQL, right? Let's say you come to the new database like a Cassandra or a MongoDB, right? So now if something happened on the MongoDB when you use the MongoDB, that doesn't mean you should stop using MongoDB in future, right? That doesn't mean anything other than that crash the database, right? Don't go for the caveman anti-pattern, because you should not do it. You should always keep updating your knowledge in the breadth-wise. So how this can happen in a project, caveman anti-pattern? So let's say you are working on a project with certain developers doing a very advanced functionality. So you make a dependent to that developer, and then you are scared to use a different developer to touch that code, because that developer is because you don't have a confidence about it, right? Because you didn't try to understand that code base and how it works. So then you are not, I'm not saying you have to go and develop it, right? What I'm saying, at least you have to have a frequent code reviews to understand that code, move with it, so then you are not scared to touch that code again. So if you make a developer dependent code base, or a particular something dependent on the code base, then still you are going to the caveman anti-pattern. Why? Because you can go out, right? Because you are stuck with that person or that framework. The same thing can happen with the tech debts. For example, let's say your API is frequently getting a timeout. You don't look at the cause for the timeout, and you just go there and you just try to fix you can increase the timeout. Now you increase the timeout, now 15 minutes, now you increase furthermore 30 minutes, now you increase more 45 minutes, right? So now you have 45 minutes HTTP timeout, but you don't fix the code back. Why? Because you are hesitant to go to that code base. Why? Because either you are stuck with the framework, or either you are stuck with the developer. So what you should do, you should go out and see why this problem comes. If this is a limitation of a technology, if the limitation of a language, if the limitation of the server you're using, don't be scared to go out and do a POC and migrate to a different one, because we see problems and we moving on. We started with HTTP 0.9, then HTTP 1, then 1.1, then 2, now 3 release, right? Why? Because industry is evolving. But if you're still using HTTP 1, you have a serious problem. At least come to 1.1. But now I would say, don't start with the 1.1, because HTTP 3 is already there, right? As architects, you should go explore and use it, and at least do a POC to see where that fit. I don't want to make this video too lengthy, but today we are trying to emphasize how you can fall into the caveman anti-pattern and why it is bad for your project and also your career. So then I'll talk to you in another video about Architect 101, and make sure you subscribe and put your comment and give your feedback. You can reach me on my page, you can reach me on LinkedIn, and give your feedback and share things what you expect me to discuss, and let's stay in touch.